I found this fern lying on the side of the road a couple of weeks ago. It was in a neighbor's rubbish pile waiting for the truck to come by. And I felt so bad for it. I thought, you know what, this plant needs a second chance. So I wanted to see what I could do with it. The leaves were almost completely yellowed, and so I threw it over my fence and ran the hose. I wanted to first make sure that there was no infestation. I checked, didn't see any aphids or spider mites or anything like that, because I didn't want to contaminate my garden. And I didn't see anything obvious that was wrong, other than the plant was completely dried out. So the first thing I did was put it into a tub of water and let it soak for a couple of hours. It's completely root bound. What happens when a plant is root bound is that the roots will start growing sideways and they wrap around themselves. And the reason that they're doing this is they are looking for nutrients. Typically, when they're in the soil and they're in a good place, they'll be finding the nutrients that they need, or they'll just keep growing longer and longer to actually search for that. But when they are in a pot, they really don't have anywhere to go except around the edges. So they'll just loop round and round, and eventually it'll get to the point where they actually constrict themselves. Here we can see how the roots have actually just looped round and round, and there's almost no soil. They've used up a lot of the soil and the nutrients in the soil. There are a lot of roots but not much soil. Pot plants need to be repotted every 2 to 3 years, depending on the size of the plant, depending on how much food they are receiving, if they're getting a liquid fertilizer. And you can usually tell that a plant's struggling when the leaves start dying, or there's browning or yellowing. So I think what we're going to do with this plant is we're going to actually just cut back some of these roots. And I'll show you why I'm going to do this rather drastic move. These roots on the side are kind of mushy. You can see by the color that they just don't look healthy. Here is a root that is healthy though. You can see the color difference. So we're going to keep that one, and then we're going to cut back a bunch of these that are just wrapped all the way around. So this shows really nicely how how bad it can look when the roots just wrap around themselves and there's really no soil. So they are on a search for some nutrients and just not finding anything. So they just keep going, keep looking. There's a little bit of soil in the middle. Not a whole lot though. So when you repot a plant every 2 or 3 years, you can sometimes just put it in fresh soil, nice organic composted soil, and you reuse the same pot. But depending on the type of plant, sometimes you need to go with a slightly larger pot. That way you can put a little bit more soil in and give the plant some room to grow. It also depends on the size space you have in the house that you want to keep the plant in. Leave it, Izzy. Isabella, leave it. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that I've pulled off a lot of the dead roots, is I'm going to feel around and see how healthy the trunk or stem is. If there's any give at all, like it feels soft or kind of mushy, you definitely want to remove that. So those 3 feel pretty good. There's one here that had snapped off, and the stem is quite soft, so I'm going to actually cut this out if I can. Just very carefully without damaging the others. There we go. That came out quite well. And this whole section is soft, so we definitely want to discard that. Alright, we're left with 3 pretty good, healthy sections. So I'm just going to cut back as much of the dead stuff as I can and keep going. Oh, this is rotted. You want to cut back until you see a healthy section. So this was the top of it. You can see that does not look good. It's rotting, and it may have a little creature living in there. And then you want to cut down until it looks healthy like that. Next I'm going to place it right in the bucket of water. Give it another good soaking. And then we're going to look at some of the leaves at the top, the fronds as they are called. And we want to cut back a few of the really damaged leaves or fronds. This is a new one that hasn't opened yet, so we'll definitely save that. You don't want to cut back too much initially because the plant's going to be in shock. But we can see this one that's completely bent. There's no way we can save that one. So let's cut that back. And perhaps in a couple months' time, when the plant has recovered, if it's going to recover, then we'll go through and we'll trim back a few of the really bad looking fronds that just do not recover. I think what I will do is trim off a couple of these dead ones on the top. Not ideal, but at least it'll look a little cleaner and healthier. So next what we're going to do after it's had a bit of a drink, I'm going to put it into a new pot, and we'll make sure that that pot is a little larger than what it was in, and then we're going to fill it up with soil. So before you start that, you want to measure to make sure that it sits about the same depth that it was before. So you'll put some soil underneath, and that way it can rest on the new soil, and the soil level will be at the same height at the top of the trunk. don't allow rotting to happen. So this is the pot that it was in. This was the inside pot, and this is the pot, the decorative pot that was, there we go, it was like that. So what I'm going to do is, this pot's just a little bit bigger, and I'm going to use this decorative pot, and this should fit nicely, I think. Yep. The first thing I'm going to do with the new pot is put in some pieces of terracotta or stone over each of the drainage holes. And this doesn't block the drainage holes, it just makes sure that the soil does not wash out. The other reason to put stones in the bottom of a pot is to ensure that the roots are not sitting in water, so there's a little bit of space for them to just be off the bottom of the pot if you happen to overwater it. So the next thing we'll do is measure it. You want to ensure that the plant is sitting at the same height that it was, and you're going to pack fresh soil around it. So like this, for instance, we want to make sure that the green part is not covered up. If you do cover it, what happens is the moisture against the healthy trunk or stem will allow for bacteria or little borer bugs or different things to get in, and that will start rotting out the area. The next step is to water, and when we water, we want to make sure that we're watering nice and deep all the way around. You want to ensure that there are no pockets of air that are trapped. The reason for that is moist air will actually allow for bacteria to grow, and the plant's going to be in stress for a while, so you do want to baby it a little bit as it settles down in its new soil, its new environment. The reason it is stressed is because of the amount of roots that were cut off and leaves, and then on top of it, it's had been pretty roughly treated beforehand, had dried out, and so you want to look after it as much as you can and kind of baby it along.